This past weekend, President Trump and Secretary of Defense Hegseth sent the National Guard to Los Angeles. What was the president's reasoning for sending in the National Guard without a request from the state's governor for the first time since 1965, when President Johnson did so to protect civil rights demonstrators from state action against them?
Hey everyone, Andrew here. Welcome back to True Voice. Before we dive in, if you like what we're doing here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our takes on the issues that matter. So I just watched a pretty concerning video, and honestly, it fired me up. You all know where I stand. I'm a proud Democrat, a proud American patriot, and what I just heard, well, let's just say it raises some serious red flags about accountability and the rule of law in this country. Let's watch.
In one state, President Trump falsely claims that Los Angeles is being, quote, invaded and occupied by, quote, violent insurrectionist mobs. Make it clear, as I always have, violence is unacceptable. Vandalism, unacceptable. You can exercise your constitutional rights, but not in the name of violence and vandalism, period. FBI Director Cash Patel echoed the language of the president, posting on Twitter, and I quote, hit a cop, you're going to jail. Doesn't matter where you came from, how you got here, or what movement speaks to you. Cash Patel, FBI. Both President Trump and Director Patel seem to have forgotten January 6, 2021, when a violent mob ransacked the Capitol complex in an actual attempted insurrection that led to the deaths of 5 police officers and injuries to more than 140 others. Cash Patel called these violent January 6 rioters, quote, political prisoners, and he produced the so-called January 6 prison choir, which sang songs and included at least 6 rioters who violently assaulted police officers. On President Trump's very first day in office, he issued a blanket pardon for January 6 rioters, including 169 who violently assaulted law enforcement officers. The Trump administration's support of these violent insurrectionists who hit cops continues to this day. After his disgraceful tenure as interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Ed Martin now is the pardon attorney for the Department of Justice. As the first political appointee to ever hold this position, Mr. Martin is personally advocating for the complete pardon of the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and others who were convicted of seditious conspiracy for their role in planning and inciting the January 6 insurrection. 11 of these individuals, who have already received sentence commutations from President Trump, are now seeking pardons despite showing no remorse for what happened on January 6. And Mr. Martin has fast-tracked them all for pardon consideration, with no justification beyond his well-known support for January 6 rioters. Long-standing DOJ guidelines for pardon petitions require, quote, a petitioner should be genuinely desirous of forgiveness rather than vindication. Listen to what Enrique Tarrio, the head of the Proud Boys, said after his sentence was commuted by President Trump. Quote, the people who did this, they need to feel the heat. They need to be put behind bars and they need to be prosecuted. Success is going to be retribution. The head of the Proud Boys about the prosecutors at the Department of Justice. Does that sound like someone who desires forgiveness rather than vindication? Of course not. But Ed Martin reportedly wants President Trump to pardon Enrique Tarrio. For his part, Tarrio reports that last month he had a, quote, great conversation, close quote, with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Tarrio said, and I want to quote him, Trump called me and my mom over while we were at dinner and said he was sorry for what Joe Biden did to all the J6ers and said he was working on making things right. I thanked him for giving me my life back. He replied with, I love you guys. DOJ guidelines also provide that, quote, in general, a pardon is granted on the petitioner's good conduct for a substantial period of time after conviction and service of sentence. But at least 12 insurrectionists pardoned by President Trump have already been sentenced and charged with additional serious crimes since January 6. It appears Director Patel's claim that if you, quote, hit a cop, you're going to jail, only applies to people who President Trump doesn't agree with politically. I urge my Republican colleagues to join Democrats in condemning the ongoing effort to whitewash what happened on January 6th.
Well, Senator Durbin, he's left me in charge.
This is a scary moment.
I'm very scared.
Durbin then questions President Trump's reasoning for sending the National Guard to Los Angeles without the governor's request. Think about that for a second. That hasn't happened in decades. As a Democrat, someone who believes strongly in states' rights and the proper chain of command, this is deeply troubling. It feels like an overreach of federal power, and frankly, it's unnecessary and potentially inflammatory. And then, the language used by Trump, calling Los Angeles invaded and occupied by violent insurrectionist mobs. It's just irresponsible. Of course, nobody condones violence or vandalism. We believe in peaceful protest, the right to assembly, all those fundamental American principles. But to paint an entire city with such a broad and inaccurate brush, it feels like deliberately trying to divide us further. What really got under my skin, though, was the mention of FBI Director Cash Patel's comments. Hit a cop. You're going to jail, he says, and on the surface, you might think, okay, fair enough. But the hypocrisy here is just staggering. The video rightly points out the stark contrast between this statement and the way Trump and some of his allies have downplayed or even excused the January 6th attack on our Capitol. We saw officers assaulted, lives lost, our democracy threatened, and yet we have people like Patel seemingly downplaying the severity of that day, even calling those who attack law enforcement political prisoners. It's a slap in the face to every single officer who defends our communities and our country. 5 officers died as a result of that attack, and over 140 were injured. Let that sink in. And the fact that Trump issued blanket pardons to January 6th rioters, including many who assaulted police officers, it's unbelievable. It sends a dangerous message that there are different standards of justice depending on your political affiliation. As a Democrat, as an American who believes in equal justice under the law, this is simply unacceptable. The discussion about Ed Martin, the pardon attorney, allegedly pushing for complete pardons for groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers who were convicted of seditious conspiracy, it's chilling. These are groups that actively sought to undermine our democratic process through violence. To even consider pardoning them wholesale is a betrayal of our institutions and the values we claim to uphold. The video makes a crucial point about the DOJ guidelines for pardons, the idea of seeking forgiveness, not vindication. We heard about Enrique Tarrio from the Proud Boys talking about retribution after his sentence was commuted. That doesn't sound like someone seeking forgiveness. It sounds like someone who believes they were wronged, not that they did wrong. And finally, the statistic that at least a dozen insurrectionists pardoned by Trump have since been charged with more serious crimes. It just underscores the recklessness and the politically motivated nature of those pardons. It really does seem like this hit a cop, you're going to jail mantra only applies if you're not politically aligned with Trump. Look, folks, this isn't about being partisan for the sake of it. This is about the fundamental principles of our democracy. It's about accountability, the rule of law, and equal justice for all. As a Democrat and a proud American, I find these revelations deeply disturbing. We cannot allow this kind of hypocrisy and disregard for the law to become normalized. We need to demand better from our leaders and hold them accountable for their actions. What are your thoughts on all of this? Let me know in the comments below. Let's have a respectful discussion. And again, if you haven't already, please subscribe to True Voice for more takes on the issues that matter. Thanks for watching.